Hello, everyone. My guest today is Nancy Solari. She's from California. And I must say that you will truly be inspired by her. And instead of me giving all the information, I'll let her introduce herself. So, welcome with us, Nancy.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And for everybody listening, I know public speaking can sometimes be scary, but there's nothing like knowing that you're saying something that just touches one person, maybe 10 people, maybe 100 people, and that's what we do it for. So I'm excited to be a part of everyone's journey.
Oh, that's great. I'm so happy that I'm having you today. And let's start right off. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what's your business, because you're doing a lot of great things.
Well, thank you. I guess I'll step back a bit and just kind of let everybody know my company name is called Living Full Out, and we launched in 2008. And it was really born out of the fact that we wanted to help people achieve their goals and dreams. And sometimes it's hard to put those elements together, whether it be physically or emotionally. How am I going to do this? And what does it look like? And so when we started in 2008, one of the first things we did as a delivery method to assist people was speaking. And so it was really finding the first audience groups that we wanted to connect with. And our journey started with women entrepreneurs and the visually impaired, because I myself am actually legally blind. I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa,
Okay.
which I was actually diagnosed with at 16. So today I'm legally blind. So everything in my world is really blurry, and there's not like colors. Everything's kind of dull, and I see mainly like shapes and shadows and that kind of thing.
Wow.
But that's really how I kicked off my speaking career.
That's interesting. And what made you embrace public speaking, knowing that you probably had that extra challenge to it?
Yeah, I will tell you, it was a bit of a challenge. Um, I grew up with getting a degree in broadcasting and psychology, and I went into TV, and then I went into the music industry, and then into real estate. And well, in all of those careers, it involved talking. It wasn't talking to an audience of 20, 100, 1,000 people. So it was kind of intimidating to figure out, how do you put a message together? How do you connect with an audience, especially for me, and not being able to see their eyes, or
True.
are they interested? Are they falling asleep? There were some early challenges. But a lot of times I learned to take audio cues, which I think is good anyway. So involving the audience, asking them questions, getting them to answer back. You get a pulse right there as to, are they listening? Are they connected? And then if you can, walk into the audience, be with them. So a lot of times speakers put themselves on a stage, on a riser, and you're higher than your audience. I
Mm-hmm.
really like it when I'm at the same level as my audience, or even if I can have an assistant help me and I can walk out into the audience and like grab their hand, it helps with a deeper connection.
That's great. And it's also a great tip, I find, for people that don't have a sight problem, because being attentive to the energy in the room is so important. And you probably develop that extra sense to it because you cannot see them. But I really like the fact that you still enjoy just having someone assist you and go into the audience to feel them. What a way to do it. And how did you manage to start doing so? Because I guess that was another added challenge. Sometimes you have the technical crews or the event organizers that are set in their roles. So that must have been really interesting. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question, because I am different than their average speaker. Because most speakers, they might stand at the podium, they might use a PowerPoint. I will sometimes use a PowerPoint, and mainly I do that so an audience is visually stimulated. but I
Yes.
can't see the PowerPoint. It doesn't do me any good. It's not going to keep me on track. You know what I mean? And so what I decided is to really build a moment within the room. So, like when you go to a concert and it's one main singer on stage. Yes, they have a light show and all these things going on, maybe dancers, but it's that singer's voice. It's the words that they say. It's the stories that they tell within their song. It's that power that pulls people in. They don't need the dancers. They don't need the lights. It's that voice. So what I've learned in my speaking career is that it isn't about the PowerPoint. It isn't about, looking good. It's all about the stories you tell. And if you tell compelling stories and relatable stories, that's when you'll grab your audience.
I so love your answer, because that is one thing I've been telling speakers and clients for so many years, that forget about putting the focus on your PowerPoint. That's not it. You're supposed to be the most important person there. You're the one presenting. And also that you bring in that storytelling part to it. It's a shame that so many people these days, they don't even think it's important. They just go on autopilot and they just deliver information instead of making sure they have a compelling story that goes with it. I really, really like how you put it, because I'm sure people will realize, well, if that helps her public speaking, even though I'm seeing, I should probably put in the same effort to walk the room, have a compelling story. And maybe a question I would have, did you do anything different, or did you have any special classes to practice your voice, since that's your most important tool that you have?
Well, yeah, I was always into singing growing up, singing in college, national anthems and different things. And of course, I studied broadcasting in college. So using my voice was already part of my hobbies and my profession. But you can have a voice and you can carry it well, but you still have to be able to tell those stories. And so what
Absolutely.
I invite your audience to do is even take going out to lunch with a friend, even take going to a networking group or a party on a weekend, a barbecue, whatever. Take that as moments to start telling stories and listening to other people's stories. And that's how you get to be better and better and better as a speaker, is that listening and also having something of value to talk about, something other than the weather. Tell them about a hard day you had, or a success you had, or how you helped a client. I think a lot of times when we network with other people, it is that kind of superficial conversation. But again, you can't have that superficial conversation as a networker, and you definitely can't have it as a speaker. You got to have that honest, meaningful delivery.
Oh, absolutely. And I also like that you're pointing out having also an intention to listen, listening well to what people are saying, listening not with the intention of what am I going to reply, just listening to take in that story, take in what people are sharing with us. That must be an important part of what you're doing also when you're public speaking.
Absolutely. And to couple that with the storytelling, it is that delivery method of how do you stay on target. Again, a lot of speakers will rely on their PowerPoint. They'll refer to it. It keeps them on track, or they'll have index cards or something like that. Being legally blind, none of that helps me. So I will share with your audience something that I have defined over the years, and this has helped me, and it actually has been fun for the audience as well. I will always ask the organizers to give me a 6-foot table to my right side, and I have little dividers, and I kind of, depending on how long my speech is, I might have 5 different dividers, or I might have 10 if it's like a 3-hour speech. And then what I did is we have a place here called Michael's, a craft store, and I went and I got little mementos, little reminders of my stories. So if I'm telling a story about being in Paris, France, I have a little teeny ornament that is the Eiffel Tower. If
Nice.
I'm telling a story about my faith or something like that, I have a little teeny cross. And so as I go through, I just pick up each of these little props and they keep me on track. And I know that when I pick up a prop, each story should be able to be told within about 2 minutes. And so I just have as many props as I need to guide me through my presentation.
That is so cool. I love that trick because you have adapted, so to speak, a way to, let's call it visually, you feel your cues instead of seeing them. And that is really an interesting way to stay on track. It does bring another question for me. How do you manage that timing part? Because most of people will, yeah, like you said, they will rely on their slides. They will have a timer. They will see something. How do you manage to keep track of time and have the feeling that you're staying focused?
That is a great question. Honestly, we always have to think of the audience first. And
Oh,
just
yeah.
if you put it in the audience, how long would you want to hear a story? And generally, stories that go any longer than 5 minutes can sometimes go on and on and on. So I start there first. I put a limit to how long I want to talk about a story, generally between, I would say, 2 and 5 minutes. And then I kind of think about that story, and I have to have just a little bit of context about setting up the situation, the event, the moment. And then I share with them the pain, the stress, the problem I was facing. And
Mm-hmm.
then I share the solution, whatever I figured out, whatever the aha moment was. And then I bring it always back around to the audience. So I make sure that I hit 4 things: context of the story, what was the problem, what was the solution, and how does that relate to the audience?
That's a really important point. And you're doing in a natural way what every speaker should be doing, putting the audience first, because that's the most important thing. We should be thinking about the value we're giving them, which will also make us more memorable in the end, finally. So that's really an important point you're sharing there.
Yeah.
And
You know, the thing I'll say about that is, and I'm sure many speakers who are listening today have had this moment. It's like after you give a speech and you're done, you kind of have that butterflies in your stomach, but kind of excited. You're like, let's do that again. You know, that was fun.
yes.
Or, you know, when's the next gig, right? It's this really great energy. Well, you want your audience to have that same energy. So when you're done talking, as they're clapping or after they're done and you're walking off stage, you want them to say to yourself, wow, that was great information. Like you want them to have an equally memorable moment.
Oh, absolutely. I guess that's the whole point of sharing, making sure that they get as much fun out of it as we do, because that's how they will remember and also put in practice what we shared with them. I find that the more fun we can make them have, the better they are at putting everything in practice afterwards. Um, Tell me, Nancy, you have probably so many stories, but do you have one great memory that comes to mind? Something that either triggered those butterflies or something that was really memorable to you, and why was it?
You know, and that's another really good question. You have such great questions. I'm so impressed. But no, but no, that is a good one. I don't, you know, I've spoken a lot, and you know, I think that when I think about that props scenario that I told you
Mm-hmm.
about just a second ago, one of the ones that stands out to me is when I was offered to speak at this event. And initially it was supposed to be for 60 minutes. And they were like, you know what? We want you to speak for 4 hours. Like, we just want you to just keep on going. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. But 4 hours, I mean, that was that was a ton of props, and that was a ton of stories. I had 42 stories. I had 42 props, and
That
you better
is
believe I used that 6 foot table. And honestly, as I went through each story, and by the time I was done, and I turned to my assistant at the time, and I said, "So, did I go over?" And she goes, "You're like literally within 1 minute." And it was amazing. And trust me, I didn't spend hours and hours of 4-hour blocks practicing, right? It was just kind of understanding the story, being familiar with it, speaking from the heart. But I felt really proud of myself that that everything had just come together and I hit my mark. And I was glad that I was 1 minute early rather than 1 minute late, because I always want to kind of give that gift to the audience if I can be just a little bit earlier than later.
Oh, you're so right. And that is so important, because I always tell people, you know what? You'll never have anyone complain if you finish before the end, but you'll make them a little bit, ah, they'll probably be a little bit stressed out, or even sometimes frustrated if you go over, because then you're not showing respect for their time and their schedule. And if you're at an event with a lot of speakers, then you're just pushing the limits on everyone else afterwards. So that is really, really important. But at the same time, it's so impressive being on mark and a minute early. You have all my admiration, because you cannot follow a clock or anything. So that is really amazing. Which brings
Thank
me,
you.
how do you prepare your speeches or your presentations, especially when you have to play with that time frame thing?
So I always do a prep call with the event coordinator beforehand. And I know not every speaker does, but I do. And I always want to understand, who is in the audience, what is the demographics, what is the gender, what are challenges that they are currently facing professionally and personally.
Mm-hmm.
What solutions do these professionals already have at their fingertips? Where does the event planner think that they need the most motivation? What is the overall theme of the event? What are the expectations of the audience? And so I try to find out all of these details. And that way, when I'm picking my stories, it's not that I'm just picking stories that I want to tell. I'm picking the stories that I think will be the most useful, relatable to them.
Yes. And I love so much how you replied, because it proves that we should always put the audience first, the what's in it for them. And you do an admiring job at doing all that research before. And I think that should be an inspiration for all other speakers that probably skip that step too many times and are not really focused on the needs that the people they will have in front of them might have. So that's really an important part, and probably has served you well up until now because of all the preparation that you do.
It takes away the anxiety. And also, I know that I'm on point. That's the thing. And I don't think preparations should be memorizing. I know there's plenty of speakers that do memorize. That's just not my style. Because again, I take those butterflies, I take those nerves, and I channel that into speaking honestly.
Yes.
Because if you're too polished, if you're too raw, that loses people. They feel like they're being sold. But if you have kind of a nervous energy in your voice, if you're heartfelt, then you'll pull them in more and they feel like you're with them, you're not talking at them.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. That is really a good point there, a good tip that everyone should be thinking about. And tell me finally, we're already at the end of this. You have so many things, so many interesting things that you shared so far. But if you would have to give one tip that would empower either women or men to do great at public speaking, what would it be?
Number one, have fun. Okay, number one, have fun. And I say that because a lot of times people, when they're crafting their stories or thinking about what they're going to say, sometimes they're too much in their head. And you want to have fun with it because, yes, you're there to educate, but you're also there to entertain. And
Yes.
so you want to bring humor, you want to bring tears. Now, it's okay to cry. I actually admire when I look at TED Talks or I look at people and they're so moved that they're crying. They got me, right? I'm with
Yes.
them. I feel their situation. So whatever you're moved to feel emotionally, do it. And even if you're angry, even if in your story it's something that you've gone through, like we have a radio show at Living Full Out that we do, and people can learn more about that by going to livingfullout.com. But we will get sometimes guests on our show who are angry about what happened to them, and it's really compelling. And so even as a speaker, showing that emotion will capture your audience and keep them attentive.
Absolutely. And I think these days it's all about making sure that they do have emotions when they listen to us, because what makes our talk, our message, and ourselves more memorable, because we made them feel something. So that's really, really an important one. And I appreciate all the information. You have been so generous and shared so much with the listeners. It's incredible. What I'll be doing anyway, underneath the player, I always put that little bio and how people can reach you. So they'll have your website, and I'll share at least another social media link so they can connect with you and get to know what you do. And I would also say get inspired by everything that you do, Nancy. I thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope everybody lives full out as a speaker, and just, again, have fun.
Absolutely. Thank you again.